School. For many of us, it's a place of learning, friendships, and maybe a few awkward moments. But for others, the hallways hold secrets. The classrooms echo with more than just lessons. And the nights, well, the nights are when the real stories begin. Today, we're dimming the lights and unlocking the doors to some of the most unsettling, mysterious, and totally baffling, and downright creepy school memories ever shared. These are 7 true stories that prove sometimes the most terrifying things aren't just in horror movies. Get ready, because class is now in session. Our first story comes from a viewer named Mark, who worked as a night janitor at an old elementary school built in the 1920s. Do you often hear faint whispers or the sound of a single desk lid slamming shut in an empty classroom? He'd always brush it off as the old building settling, but one night, while buffing the floors in the main hall, he saw it. At the far end, a small, shadowy figure of a child stood watching him. It wasn't menacing, just there. Mark blinked, and it was gone. He continued working, his heart pounding. A few minutes later, he felt a cold spot pass right through him. He looked down and saw a single, small, dusty footprint on his freshly polished floor, pointing away from him, towards the oldest wing of the school. He never saw the figure again, but he'd often find a single, unexplained footprint somewhere in the building for the rest of his time there. Next, we have a story from Sarah, who was in her high school's drama club. Their theater was notoriously haunted by a spirit they nicknamed the Critic. He was supposedly a former drama teacher who was very particular about performances. Strange things would happen during rehearsals, props moving on their own, lights flickering during a dramatic monologue, or a disembodied voice sighing loudly if an actor flubbed a line. During their final dress rehearsal for Macbeth, the lead actor was struggling with a key scene. Suddenly, a heavy sandbag from the rafters, used as a counterweight, came crashing down onto the stage, landing exactly where the actor had been standing just a second before. They all froze. From the back of the empty auditorium, they heard a single, clear clap, just one. They took it as a warning from the Critic. After that, no one ever messed up that scene again. This third story is from a college student, Leo, who lived in a dorm that was once a sanatorium. His room was on the top floor, which used to be the infirmary. Late at night, he'd hear what sounded like a hospital gurney with a squeaky wheel rolling down the hall. He'd peek outside, but the corridor was always empty. One night, studying for finals, the sound was louder than ever, stopping right outside his door. The air grew intensely cold. He held his breath, too scared to move. Then he heard a soft, weak cough, seemingly from just the other side of the door. It sounded like someone was struggling to breathe. He sat frozen for what felt like an hour until the sun came up. He later found out from a campus historian that his specific room was where patients in critical condition were kept for observation. He requested a room change the very next day. Our fourth tale takes us to a rural middle school. A teacher, Miss Gable, told this story about the school's old, forgotten library in the basement. It was used for storage, filled with dusty, outdated books. One afternoon, she went down to find some old yearbooks. As she was searching, she heard what sounded like a page turning from the back of the room. "Hello," she called out, thinking a student had wandered in. No reply. She continued her search, but the sound kept happening, rhythmic and steady, like someone was leisurely reading. She followed the noise to a dark corner, behind a stack of discarded encyclopedias. There, on a dusty stool, was an old leather-bound book, lying open. As she watched, another page slowly, impossibly, turned over all by itself. She didn't wait to see what happened next. She ran out and had the door sealed for good. Story number 5 is about a group of friends who decided to sneak back into their high school at night to pull a senior prank. Their school had a swimming pool in a separate building, and that was their target. They got in through an unlocked window. The pool area was dark and silent, the water perfectly still and black. As they started setting up their prank, one of them, named Alex, heard splashing. They all stopped and listened. It was faint, but unmistakable, the gentle sound of someone treading water in the deep end. They shined their flashlights across the surface, but there was nothing. The water was undisturbed. Then the splashing stopped, and a giggle echoed through the natatorium, like that of a young girl. It sounded like it came from right beside them. They abandoned the prank and sprinted out of there, not stopping until they were miles away from the school. This next story comes from a security guard named David who worked the graveyard shift at a newly built university campus. He thought a new building would be quiet, free of ghost stories. He was wrong. One of his duties was to patrol the fine arts building. Every night, around 3 a.m., he would walk past the sculpture studio and hear the distinct sound of a chisel tapping against stone. The first few times, he'd unlock the door, expecting to find a dedicated student working late. But every time, the room was empty and dark. The sound would stop the moment he turned the key in the lock. One night, he decided to just watch from the security cameras. Right at 3:03 a.m., he saw a faint, shimmering outline of a person standing over a block of marble, their arm moving in a steady, rhythmic motion. He couldn't make out any features, but he could see the impossible. The form was chiseling away at the stone, yet the block remained untouched. For a final story, we go back to elementary school. A viewer named Chloe remembers her second-grade classroom had an old, wooden timeout chair in the corner. No one liked it. Kids would say that when you sat in it, you felt like someone was standing behind you, breathing on your neck. One day, a boy named Sam had to sit in the chair. After a minute, he started crying, not loudly, but terrified little sobs. The teacher went over and asked what was wrong. Sam, pointing at the empty space behind the chair, whispered, "The man with no eyes told me to be quiet." The teacher, trying to calm him, glanced at the wall behind the chair. She paled. Faintly scratched into the wood were the words, "I'm always watching." The chair was removed the next day, and no one ever spoke of the man with no eyes again. And that's all the time we have for today's lesson in fear. It is strange to think that the places where we were meant to feel safe can hold such dark and lingering memories. Do you have a creepy school story of your own? I'd love to read it. Share it down in the comments below. You never know, it might be featured in a future video. Thank you so much for watching and for being part of this community. If you enjoyed these stories and want to hear more, please hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Until then, stay safe and maybe think twice before staying after class.